Bitcoin, crypto, bubbles, passive indexation. There's a lot of financial jargon out there. Old Mutual can help you make sense of it all and give you great advice to make the right decisions. If you've got a question or want to know how to get the most out of your money, call them on 0860 60 60 60 or speak to an Old Mutual financial advisor or your broker. Today's the day. Get great financial advice so you can do great things. Old Mutual is a licensed financial services provider.
The Money Show. Personal Finance.
Personal Finance brought to you by Ned Group Investments. See money differently. Ned Group Investments is a registered unit trust manager. Now, we've seen the Cyril spring. We've experienced Ramaphosa. What about the Ramaphosa Rise? That was supposed to happen on the markets. Well, let me tell you what's happened year to date in terms of what's happened on markets. Shares so far this year are down 6% on the JSE. Bonds are down 8%. If you'd invested in listed property, you'd be 20% poorer today than you would have been on the 1st of January. International shares are even down 5%. 12 months ago, shares are up 10%. We've got bonds up 16%, property up 7%, international shares are flat.
Property down.
Was property down? Property was down. Property was down 7%. Thank you, Warren Ingram. And then 5 years ago, if you look at 5 years ago, shares have actually gained 10% a year, bonds 8% a year, property 7% a year, foreign shares in rands 15% a year. So it's been a very good 5-year period for shares. But the last 3 months, since Cyril Ramaphosa took over, have been bad for shares, for bonds, for property, and for international shares. Jacob Zuma was better for the stock market than Cyril Ramaphosa.
Oh, no.
Well, I mean, a simple deduction would suggest that. Warren Ingram, explain otherwise.
So, I mean, I'd like to highlight, normally shares give you around a normal 5-year period. You would expect to get about 13.5% from the South African stock market. And as you pointed out, we've received 10% a year. So actually investors haven't been well rewarded for being in the stock market. And that's the effect of Zumanomics. Over a 3-year period, you're getting to about 5% a year from shares. It just tells you when your stock market doesn't keep track with inflation that you've been through an incredibly tough time. And I think if we look at what's happening now, that's the question I get the most from investors is where's this major recovery in markets? You kept telling us that it was just we're shooting ourselves in the foot and it's all our bad decisions as a country. Now we're making great decisions and we're not getting the stock market rise. What's gone on now? And to me, I feel life's become normal. From the point of view that we're not sitting in a position where we're getting just sort of bad news flowing in all the time about South African politicians doing things wrong. Now what's happening is we're back in the world. We're back with whatever happens in the international markets does have an impact on us. And at the moment, unfortunately, what's happening in the international markets isn't that good. In fact, it's quite bad. So that's really what's causing our market to come down for the year so far.
And also, we've had a massive recovery in the rand, 20% recovery or so in the rand from its lows before Christmas, and after Christmas, a huge rally in the value of the currency. So many of our companies make more of their money outside of South Africa than in it. So when you translate their dollar, pound or euro profits back into rands, those profits are smaller. So a company like Naspers, for example, which peaked last year at 4,000 Rand a share, is now sitting closer to 3,000 Rand a share. That's a decline of 25%. It makes up 20% of the value of the JSE. That in itself is a big reason for this huge decline in the value of the stock market.
Absolutely, and that's back to the international factors. So what we're seeing now is, the rand gets stronger. It's not really a flaw in our economy. It's not now that we're doing something wrong. We're just back in international markets. The market's in favor of our currency. And I think the one reason or the one place that you can see how international investors are enjoying South Africa is actually the bond market.
Now explain the bond market to me, please. We can never explain this often enough.
So very simply, a bond is the government says we want to borrow 50 billion rand to recapitalize our state-owned enterprises. We promise to pay you, let's say, 9% a year for the next 20 years. At the end of that 20-year period, we're going to give you back your 50 billion rand. That's in its very simplest form. That's what a bond is. And then investors will decide to buy those bonds because actually, if they go and put their money in the bank, they can only get 7% a year, and they would like a bit more interest, so they'll buy those bonds. And if interest rates drop, and let's say you get to the point where you can only get 5% at the bank, you might say, well, hang on, now getting 8% on a bond, I'm actually happy to pay a bit more than what was originally offered to me. So instead of paying 100 Rand per unit of the bond, I'm going to pay 102 Rand or 103 Rand, because actually I really like that interest rate, and it's guaranteed by now a pretty good government, so let me take that. I think that's low risk. So that's really the bond market. And I think
that's the ultimate confidence barometer in a country. Equity markets sort of look forward 6 months, 12 months, 15 months. The bond market is the here and now. It is what you're going to be paying to borrow money from foreign investors, local investors, pension funds right now.
And it's a much bigger market than the stock market, and frankly, just much harder. The people that look at bonds, they're not interested in a good story. They're not. So unfortunately, business leadership's fantastic story that we've just heard, that would mean nothing to a bond investor. They're going to look at, I can get 0.5% interest on my money in dollars. I can get 8% or 8.5% on rands. I don't think the currency is a big risk at the moment. I'm going to buy South African bonds. That's it. No question about all this fluffy stuff that we get excited about.
But all the fluffy stuff that we get excited about is the building blocks of confidence and the building blocks of growth and the building blocks of what makes the bond market an attractive place to invest. So it does matter.
It does matter, sure, but it's not going to be the factor that swings a bond investor now. So the fact that those hard-nosed, very big investors are putting in, and if you look at that, the bond market's up 8% for the year to the end of March. That tells you something. Sure. And so in an environment where we're really struggling to get growth, that's a major boost in confidence. So then, not to leave it on the negative, I think at the moment it feels to me like we're watching, water coming over a waterfall. All the time we're watching great news. Day after day, we're seeing, very good moves by government. And to me, those are filling up the bucket. And at some point, that bucket's going to overflow into positive sentiment, into good moves in the market. So I feel, for now, speaking to people that have seen 5% a year from their investments for the last 3 or 4 years, which describes pretty much every retired investor in South Africa.
It's depressing.
It is depressing, and I think now is not the time to lose patience. So a lot of the time the questions are coming in to say, shouldn't I just move to cash? Because I can get 7% on my cash or 9% on my cash. And people have been saying, wait for the long term. And actually, we're pretty much getting to the long term, and we haven't had that reward from the market. And my answer is, watch this space. I think that the changes that we're seeing now will accumulate and eventually cause investors to spike the market.
We can't, however, be sort of all excited about this, because there still are big issues. There's the mining charter, there's land expropriation, there are the financial problems within the state-owned enterprises. In the corporate world, we've got Steinhoff and Resilient and the declines in Naspers, and we've got huge confidence questions over our audit profession, which was once regarded as the best in the world, and now who can we trust and how can we trust? We've got stuff to fix here. This stuff isn't a fairy with a magic wand who's going to suddenly make markets go up. We've got real jobs to do to ensure that that confidence is real and sustainable.
I agree 100%. What's nice about markets, though, is that stuff is now all in the price. It's in the price of the share market. It's in the price of the bond market. It's in the price of the rand. I think what's not in the price of investments at the moment is any new big surprises on the upside. So we are generally poised as South Africans to be more negative. We generally are more pessimistic, and some might just say realistic. And I think as we're seeing now, everyone's upgrading economic forecasts in South Africa, and it's 100% true that there's no direct correlation between suddenly that the GDP in South Africa goes up a bit quicker than everyone thought and our market's going to shoot up. That doesn't happen like that. But what it will do is, if we are constantly surprised to the upside on things like the economy growing and perhaps unemployment getting a bit better, etc., then what we will see is the sentiment, the mentality of investors changing, and that's all you need to get the market to go. So I think the issues that you're pointing out are real, but fortunately they're all known now.
Yeah.
And I think we've had all the bad news, and unfortunately for the market, we had all of the Resilient and the Steinhoff and all of that stuff happened in one big batch, almost at once. And I think it really shook investors' confidence. But now it's out, it's in the wash, and hopefully we air our dirty laundry, we clean it. And the good companies that are there, that are operating well, with those world-renowned auditors, it's not suddenly as if all the auditors in South Africa are bad. We've got a batch, but I don't think it's the country. And I think that once the confidence starts to get restored again, then I think don't lose patience with the market. It does reward you.
And just listening to Nhlanhla Nene this evening and then listening to Bonang Mohale as well, just after Eyewitness News at 7 o'clock, just that sense of exuberance and the sense of there is a clock ticking and we've got to grab this opportunity. We've been given a gap. Let's take this gap. If we fail to take the gap, this opportunity could very well slip through our fingers and South Africa will be the poorer for it. And we can't afford to let that happen.
And I think what we're seeing now is a government that's pretty responsive to things happening. So as soon as there's something that they can do quickly.
I still don't know what happened with the Yes campaign. Really, Tashma Ismail came in here last night and said it's terribly bad news. There's new onerous requirements being imposed by the DTI. Whatever the DTI changed today has improved Tashma Ismail's mood, and she's back on track with the Yes campaign. That sort of responsiveness is a positive thing.
Exactly, yeah. And as soon as we all understand what delinking means, then we'll know that it's good or not.
I must delink you. Warren Ingram, thank you. You are delinked. You're free to go. Warren Ingram is a financial advisor. He is a director at Galileo Capital on The Money Show on this Thursday night.
World-renowned auditors. It's not suddenly as if all the auditors in South Africa are bad. We've got a batch, but I don't think it's the country. And I think that, once the confidence starts to get restored again, then I think, don't lose patience with the market. It does reward you.
And just listening to Nhlanhla Nene this evening and then listening to Bonang Mohale as well, just after Eyewitness News at 7 o'clock, just that sense of exuberance and the sense of there is a clock ticking and we've got to grab this opportunity. We've been given a gap. Let's take this gap. If we fail to take the gap, this opportunity could very well slip through our fingers and South Africa will be the poorer for it. And we can't afford to let that happen.
And I think what we're seeing now is a government that's pretty responsive to things happening. So as soon as there's something that they can do quickly.
I still don't know what happened with the Yes campaign. Really, Tashma Ismail came in here last night and said it's terribly bad news. There's new onerous requirements being imposed by the DTI. Whatever the DTI changed today has improved Tashma Ismail's mood, and she's back on track with the Yes campaign. That sort of responsiveness is a positive thing.
Exactly, yeah. And as soon as we all understand what delinking means, then we'll know that it's good or not.
I must delink you. Warren Ingram, thank you. You are delinked. You're free to go. Warren Ingram is a financial advisor. He is a director at Galileo Capital on The Money Show on this Thursday night.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Tax Year!
At Ned Group Investments, we think that the new tax year is a reason to celebrate. It's a time to relook your finances and make the most of your savings. So make a new tax year resolution and open a tax-free investment today. 0% tax on interest, 0% tax on dividends, 0% tax on capital gains. It's a no-brainer. Ned Group Investments. See money differently. Ned Group Investments is a registered unit trust manager.
7:30, Eyewitness News Time. Tara Penny.
Thanks, Bruce. Good evening. Gary Peter has stepped down as Chief Financial Officer at Transnet, citing ill health. The parastatal has confirmed it's accepted his resignation after 12 years of service. Transnet has thanked Peter for his contribution in turning the company's financials around. Mark Greg McDonald has been appointed acting CFO. Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene says there's renewed commitment from government to tackle the economic problems facing the country and attract investment. Nene is attending the 2018 spring meetings of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank Group in Washington, D.C. He says Team South Africa has been featuring quite prominently and has shown its commitment to addressing economic problems. The Finance Minister says the country is working on a long-term goal to effectively capitalize on its global growth.
It is also when SADC steps up its regional integration agenda, which is actually taking shape as we speak, because there are a number of practical initiatives that are underway already.
AfriForum private prosecutor Gary Nel has questioned why, after 30 months, the NPA has failed to re-enroll the criminal case against EFF leader Julius Malema. Nel announced earlier today he's seeking a private prosecution against Malema on fraud and corruption charges. The 40 million rand fraud and money laundering case involved On Point Engineering, but was struck from the roll in August 2015 because one of Malema's co-accused claimed he was ill. Nel says that co-accused now appears to be healthy.
Very senior prosecutor in the NPA, somebody from the Special Commercial Crimes Unit, was allocated the matter. He indicated to court that the matter was court ready. He indicated that the state was ready to proceed.
The EFF believes Malema is being targeted because of the party's recent push for land expropriation without compensation. And the DA says it's asked the Eskom board to provide a declaratory statement on the current coal supply. It emerged this week that there's a shortage of coal and that supply is allegedly at the same level it was in 2008 when South Africa first experienced load shedding. The parastatal insists it's not at emergency level yet and that everything is being done to avoid rolling blackouts. The DA's Shadow Minister of Public Enterprises, Natasha Matsone, says she wants Eskom to be transparent.
What we're asking for is Eskom to make a declaratory statement to the South African public indicating exactly how much coal supply they have and what plans they have in place as a contingency for if there comes a point that we might enter load shedding.
A partly cloudy Friday in store for Gauteng with thundershowers, overnight lows of 11 and 14 degrees, highs of 25 and 27. Fine in Cape Town, a light southerly forecast, a low of 13 and a high of 22 degrees. The top story this hour, Gary Peter has stepped down as CFO at Transnet, citing ill health.
The Koketso Sechane Show, Mondays to Thursdays from 8 p.m. and Sundays from 9.
If you were in a position to advise Patricia de Lille, what would you ask her, tell her, advise her to do? Chawe in Kels River.
In English, we say, you've got them by the balls. My advice to her, get someone else to help you squeeze. You've got them by the balls.
Koketso Sechane on Cape Talk, your number one news and talk station.
Winter's on the way, so insist on Frocks Handy Gas with the trusted red seal of safety, guaranteeing your handy gas cylinder is 100% correctly filled and 100% safe. You will also find it really handy to order your gas online at afroxshop.co.za or just drop into your nearest Frocks outlet or approved distributor. Remember, that's afroxshop.co.za. Frocks Handy Gas, for warmth you can trust.
An exciting new Cape Town private school, Railham Preparatory, is set to transform the educational landscape through its innovative and progressive approach. Situated on Berkshire Boulevard, Sunningdale, Railham Preparatory's focus is on redesigning education for the future. In partnership with Garden Cities, Railham Preparatory will open its doors in 2019 for children aged 3 to 13. For enrollment information, contact us on 087 806 2303.
Tired of pulling your hair out over your monthly water and electricity costs? Stop the pain. Install solar and use sunlight to provide electricity to your existing geyser. North Face Solar is offering 10% off the latest solar technology, which is more eco-friendly, won't overheat or lose water in summer, and is more efficient in winter. Take the pain out of those Eskom bills and visit northfacesolar.co.za. North Face Solar. Energy doesn't have to cost the earth.
The Money Show.
Small business.
Small Business Focus brought to you by Chartered Accountants of South Africa, responsible business leaders. Good evening and welcome to The Money Show. 24 minutes to 8 o'clock this evening. Karima Brown standing by in Johannesburg to keep you up to date with what's happening in the world of politics, and Koketso Sechane in Cape Town, keeping you company from 8 o'clock this evening. Alon Reyes joins us now. Alon Reyes is the Chief Executive of Reyes Corp. He's on the line to us from Johannesburg. Tonight you want to talk, Alon, about governments, the importance of where government focuses its attention, where it puts its money. So much money is thrown at small businesses, at entrepreneurs who are starting out, maybe the one-person shop or whatever the case might be. Lots of help is given there. It's desperately needed, but is it the right place to invest money to get maximum effect, bang for our collective buck?
Well, thanks, Bruce. Thanks for having me. And the simple answer is no. The one-person band is not the right place from a return point of view. From a long-term strategic point of view, it's important that some money goes there to maybe facilitate that they precipitate as entrepreneurs. But in terms of the real support, if funding is a limited resource, which we know it is, then it's the wrong place to be focusing. The 10-person band just as a number, be it 9 or 12, but around that number is the right place to be supporting small business.
Why is a business that employs 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people a more sure thing than the startup phase company?
Well, there are really 6 reasons why, and I've been working with one of the governments in South America around these pointers. So I want to go maybe through some of them with you. So first of all, once you reach the 10-person size, that generally takes time, and time is a wonderful thing to determine character. Because first of all, if you're going to be supporting businesses, you want to know that the entrepreneurs that are running those businesses have the right character in order to scale those businesses. And getting to a point where it's a 10-person operation means that there's tenacity, and they have already persisted through some challenges. So there's already some proof of concept that you're backing the right jockeys, so to speak.
All right, there's no guarantee, though. I mean, even when a company gets to some scale of, say, employing 10 people, there's no guarantee that is a recipe for success. They may still crash and burn. You tell a story, and I'd love you to tell it here, of a guy who you made up a name of Joe Mkhize, but a sign writer in Johannesburg. It's based on a real guy with a real story who was doing very nicely, thank you, as exactly one of these kinds of businesses, and was doing very, very well. And then he got funding.
He got money.
And that ruined his life.
Yeah, so this is a true story. We've changed the name, but this is a really true story, which is a terrible story about a guy who was in the business. He used to make the vinyl that you put on the containers that go around the country. And he was running a wonderful business, making about 400,000 Rand a year net profit, after a salary of 60,000 Rand. Sure. So it was around a 10-person operation. Got a R1 million investment in inverted commas, which was a grant, and that destroyed the business. A year later, the business wasn't there. Why? Because what happened was that he used the money incorrectly, where he took the money. He then bought a printer, a high big format printer. That required him to move premises. The new premises was additional rent. Then he required one operator and then a second operator to run that. So that was 2 additional salaries. And then he had to insure the machine. And then, of course, he had to focus on it, and he wasn't focusing on sales. And taking a business where he was very focused on making this business profitable, all of a sudden got the wrong type of money, the wrong type of advice, and then the business imploded. But that to me is where the funding is misplaced at the wrong time in the journey of the entrepreneur. And we focus too much, Bruce, on funding, and it's not funding. It's funding at the right time in the business that's important.
Funding at the right time in a business, but also providing support on that funding. It's pointless giving somebody money and allowing them to scale, and actually they scale too quickly. I mean, there's a wonderful way to evolve your business, and you're learning and you're making mistakes, but none of those mistakes are fatal along the way because they're fairly small and incremental, and you can easily take a step back. Suddenly you take a business that makes 400,000 Rand profit a year and you add an extra R1 million worth of capital into that business, and that takes the proportions beyond the scale with which the person can cope immediately.
Yes, and that really comes back to the reason why to focus on the 10-person operation, because for me also what that time does is that once a business gets to that 10-person size, we've proved to some extent that there is a market that can sustain it. We've also proved that there's some level of sophistication of systems, such as payroll, accounting software, websites, etc., for that business to scale. And also, as you quite rightly put, that proof that the business can adapt over time incrementally. So when you add money to this too quickly, you basically don't allow the business to mature in a natural way. You force it to scale. Okay, I'm using the word force in inverted commas. You force it to scale, and very often the systems are immature. The entrepreneur has not had the experience. The markets haven't been proven. and then there's no financial records to speak of at that point, and so they can't get, let's call it, regular funding from the banks. And so the businesses then collapse. But the real reason, Bruce, why what I've seen where they collapse is because when businesses are in a 1 to 2 person operation, their cost structures are actually not real. So they generally are working from home, so they don't have rental in any consideration in their costing. They're employing their cousins, brothers, uncles, mother's daughter, who can't find a job, so their salary bill is not at the right level. As soon as money comes into this equation, the business then needs to take formal premises, paying real rents, paying real salaries, and then the models crash. So you've got to get the model right before you add the money. And that's really the most important point here.
That's an absolute critical point, and more with Alon Rise in just a few minutes' time. He's the chief executive at Rise Corp. And it's all well and good saying we must really focus our attention and the money on businesses that are 10-person businesses. But how do you get to a 10-person business scale if you haven't had any help to get there in the first place? And that's the biggest obstacle, is getting started. So Alon Rise, that's the question we come back with in just a moment.
Numerology studies tell us that numbers have symbolic meaning.